Chapter 1. The rule of non interference. The rule had existed longer than most empires. It was older than treaties, older than councils, older even than the quiet fear that settled into the bones of every non-human species whenever the word human appeared on a data slate. Observe, record, leave. That was the rule. Humans had written it themselves long ago, after the galaxy decided it was safer that way. The irony was never lost on them. The planet beneath Elias Cade's boots was officially designated K739b, though no one used that name anymore. In older charts it had been listed as a minor trade colony, populated by a soft-skinned, low-gravity species whose language translated loosely to those who share warmth. That name, too, had been archived, filed under defunct. The world was dead now. Ice stretched to the horizon in every direction, a pale white sheet broken only by jagged crystal formations that rose from the ground like frozen lightning strikes. The sky above was a dull slate gray, heavy with unmoving clouds that reflected no light from the distant star. There was no wind, no birds, no motion at all. Silence, absolute and oppressive. Elias moved slowly, each step deliberate. His boots crunched softly against the frozen surface, the sound unnaturally loud inside his helmet. The suit's internal heaters hummed steadily, keeping the cold at bay, but the chill still found ways to creep in, through memory, through instinct, through the quiet understanding that this place had not always been empty. His scanner pulsed against his wrist, projecting a faint holographic grid over the terrain ahead. No life signs, no power sources, no movement beyond geological shifts deep beneath the ice. Exactly what command had predicted. He was here to confirm extinction. That, too, was part of the rule. Human exploration vessels were often the first to arrive after disaster. Humans were thorough, patient, and uniquely resistant to psychological fatigue, qualities that made them ideal for post-cataclysm surveys. They would map the ruins, verify the absence of survivors, and leave clean records for the galactic archives. They would not interfere. Elias paused near the edge of a shallow ravine, the scanner adjusting automatically as the terrain dipped. The ravine cut through layers of ice and stone, exposing faint traces of structures buried beneath centuries of snow. Towers once stood here, homes, places where warmth had been shared. Now there was only ice. He exhaled slowly, the sound loud in his helmet. "Survey log, timestamp 14.6, he said aloud, his voice calm and professional. No detectable signs of organized infrastructure remaining above surface level. Atmospheric readings stable but uninhabitable for most carbon-based species, confirming total colony loss." The words felt heavy, even after all these years. He had done this before, too many times. Elias stepped forward, descending carefully into the ravine. The ice walls on either side glimmered faintly with internal light, refracting his suit lamp into ghostly patterns. His boots left shallow impressions that would vanish within hours once the temperature shifted again. Another world catalogued. Another tragedy sealed in data. That was when he heard it. At first he thought it was a sensor glitch. A faint sound almost lost beneath the low hum of his suit systems. He paused, holding still, and muted all non-essential audio filters. The silence deepened. Then it came again. A sound that did not belong on a dead world, soft, uneven, fragile. A sob. Elias turned slowly, every instinct screaming at him to confirm, to deny, to pretend. His suit lamp swept across the ravine wall, illuminating crystalline growths and ancient fractures in the ice. The sound came again, clearer this time, a voice, small, shaking. "No," he whispered, more to himself than anything else. His scanner flickered. A warning icon pulsed briefly, unstable readings, possible atmospheric disturbance. Nothing definitive, nothing he could log, nothing that gave him permission. He followed the sound anyway. The rule did not say humans could not listen. He moved cautiously, rounding a cluster of crystal spires near the ravine's far end. His suit lamp swept low, then stopped. Between two jagged formations stood a figure no taller than his knee. She was unmistakably alive. The child froze as the light touched her. pale violet skin dulled by dirt and frost. Long, silvery hair hung in uneven strands around her face, stiff with ice at the tips. Her eyes, large, dark, and terrified, reflected the harsh white glow of his lamp. She wore a thin coat, brown and threadbare, its edges torn and frayed. It was meant for a warmer world, for a time before the cold had swallowed everything. Her hands trembled violently as she took a single step backward, her foot slipping on the ice. Elias did not move. The scanner on his wrist erupted in warning alerts now. Biological presence confirmed, environmental instability, external threat probability rising. The text scrolled fast, insistent, read. This was not part of the mission. This was not allowed. Lost alien colonies were classified zones. Survivors, if found, were to be reported, nothing more. Retrieval required authorization from multiple councils, weeks of review, and the presence of non-human intermediaries. Humans were not permitted to act directly, for their safety. For everyone else, Elias took a slow step backward, his hands raised slightly, palms open. His heart pounded in his chest, loud enough that he was certain she could hear it through the suit. "It's okay," he said softly, though he knew she likely did not understand his language. "I'm not," she ran. Her small feet slipped and slid across the ice as she rushed toward him, desperation overriding fear. Elias barely had time to react before she reached him, her hands clutching desperately at his glove. Her grip was weak, but it was absolute. "Please," she said, the word fractured by sobs. "Please don't leave me." The translator in his suit activated automatically, parsing her speech with a soft chime. The words hit him like a physical blow. Elias froze. He had heard screams before. He had heard death alarms, evacuation sirens, the thunder of orbital bombardment. He had heard entire cities die in minutes, but he had never heard that, not like this. Her fingers tightened around his glove as if she feared he might vanish if she let go. Tears streamed down her cheeks, freezing almost instantly in the cold air, clinging to her skin like glass. "I'm alone," she whispered. "They're all gone." His chest felt tight, constricted as memories surged unbidden to the surface. A different world, a burning skyline, smoke choking the air, a small hand slipping from his grasp as chaos tore everything apart, a promise he had failed to keep. The scanner beeped again, louder this time. New signals, atmospheric disturbances far above the cloud layer. Engines, alien patrol craft. Elias knew that signature. Fast, efficient, indifferent. They would sweep the surface, confirm the planet's status, and move on. If they detected him with her, he didn't finish the thought. Slowly, carefully, he tried to pull his hand free. The child shook her head violently, her grip tightening despite her weakness. "They'll take me," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please, please." A shadow passed over the ravine, vast and fleeting. The sky above brightened for a split second as something massive pierced the cloud cover. The patrol ship was almost overhead. Elias looked around desperately. No shelter. No ruins large enough to hide in. Just ice and crystal and the open sky. The rule screamed in his mind: observe, record, leave. He knelt. The motion was slow, deliberate, as if the universe itself were watching, waiting. The cold seeped through his suit as his knee touched the ice, but he did not feel it. He brought himself down to her level. "I won't leave you," he said, his voice barely more than a breath. The words surprised him with their certainty. The child gasped, as if she had not dared to hope they were possible. Her grip loosened just slightly, enough for him to shift his hand without breaking contact. Elias reached into a compartment on his suit and pulled free a compact thermal blanket. He wrapped it gently around her shoulders, sealing it closed as the heating elements activated. She shuddered as warmth spread through the fabric, a small, broken sigh escaping her lips. Her head leaned against his arm, trusting, immediate. Above them, the patrol ship roared past. The scanner beam swept the surface, passing over them in a wide arc. Elias remained perfectly still, his body angled protectively around the child, his suit systems running silent. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then the shadow moved on. The sky dimmed. The hum of engines faded into the distance. Silence returned to the ravine, deeper than before. The child looked up at him, her eyes wide and shining. "You came back," she whispered. Elia stood slowly, lifting her with careful hands. She weighed almost nothing, too little. A weight that spoke of hunger and cold and days spent waiting for someone who never came. Far away, more dangers waited, protocols, councils, consequences. But here, on a frozen world that the galaxy had already forgotten, a human walked forward, carrying a child the universe had left behind. And the rule of non-interference had just been broken forever. Chapter 2. What the galaxy leaves behind. Elias moved carefully across the frozen plain, each step measured, each breath controlled. The child rested against his chest, wrapped tightly in the thermal blanket, her small body radiating faint warmth that his suit sensors registered immediately. She clung to the front of his suit with one hand, the other tucked beneath the blanket, her fingers curled as if afraid the cold might reach in and steal her away again. She did not speak. Neither did he. Above them, the sky remained dull and unmoving, the patrol ship gone but not forgotten. Elias kept his scanner active, sweeping in slow arcs as he moved away from the ravine and toward the jagged ice hills to the east. The terrain there was unstable, layered with fractured stone and crystal formations that disrupted most long-range scans. A blind spot, not safe but safer. The child shifted slightly, her head pressing closer against his chest. Elias adjusted his grip instinctively, angling her away from the worst of the wind. The motion was unconscious, automatic, the kind of small protective gesture he had not made in years. "How long?" she began, then stopped, her voice too weak to finish. "How long what?" he asked gently. She hesitated. "How long before you leave?" The question struck him harder than any accusation. He kept walking. "Not today," he said finally. She absorbed that answer in silence, her fingers tightening briefly before relaxing again. It was not certainty, but it was something. More than she had been given before. They reached the foothills an hour later. The ice here was darker, mixed with veins of exposed rock that absorbed what little heat the distant star provided. Crystal spires jutted from the ground at odd angles, some taller than Elias himself, their surfaces glowing faintly from internal chemical reactions long since stabilized. Elias slowed his pace, scanning constantly. The suit fed him environmental data, temperature fluctuations, pressure changes, seismic instability, all manageable. Then the biological warnings began to flicker. Low-level movement, multiple signatures, not human, not her species either. Elias stopped. The child felt it immediately, her body tensing in his arms. "What is it?" she whispered. "Something that doesn't want to be found," he replied quietly. The scanner highlighted faint movement ahead, weaving between the crystal formations. Shapes low to the ground, elongated, their heat signatures muted and erratic, scavengers. They followed disasters the way carrion birds followed battlefields. Not soldiers, not pirates. Worse. They hunted what the galaxy abandoned. The child's breathing quickened. "They come after storms," she said softly. "After the ships leave." Elias felt his jaw tight. "How many?" he asked. Her voice dropped to almost nothing. "Enough." The scavengers emerged slowly, their forms resolving in the suit's enhanced optics. Tall, thin limbs bent at unnatural angles. Dark, segmented skin that looked more like armor than flesh. Their heads were narrow and elongated, eyeless but aware, guided by scent and vibration rather than sight. They clicked softly to one another, a low, rhythmic sound that echoed faintly across the ice. The child pressed her face against Elias' chest. "They take children," she whispered. "They sell us, or worse." Elias did not respond. He lowered her gently to the ground, keeping one arm around her shoulders as she stood, unsteady but upright. She looked up at him, fear written plainly across her face. "Stay behind me," he said. She nodded quickly, moving as close as she could without interfering. Elias straightened. The scavengers paused. They had expected prey. What they saw instead was a human. That alone was enough to make them hesitate. Humans were rare in this sector. Humans who did not flee were rarer still. Elias took a step forward. "This child is under human protection," he said, his voice amplified just enough to carry. "Leave." The clicking intensified. One of the scavengers shifted closer, its head tilting slightly as if considering him. It moved with a predator's patience, testing boundaries, measuring risk. They did not fear death, they feared resistance. Elias reached for the compact energy emitter at his hip, his fingers wrapping around the grip. He did not draw it yet. He did not want to escalate, but he would. The scavenger lunged. Elias reacted instantly. The emitter came up, discharging a concussive pulse that detonated in the air just in front of the creature. Light and sound exploded outward, a focused shockwave designed to disorient rather than kill. The scavenger screamed, a high, piercing sound that made the child cry out despite herself. The others recoiled, shrieking in response, their formation breaking as they stumbled back. Elias did not wait. He scooped the child up again and ran. The ground beneath his boots cracked and shifted as he moved at full speed, the suit compensating automatically for the unstable terrain. Crystal spires blurred past as the scavengers recovered, their shrieks echoing behind him. They followed, fast. Elias adjusted course, weaving through narrow gaps between ice formations, forcing the larger creatures to slow or detour. The child clung to him, her face buried against his shoulder, her small body trembling violently. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm sorry." "For what?" he demanded, breath steady despite the exertion. "For making you stay." Elias did not answer immediately. He burst through a narrow passage between two towering ice walls and skidded to a stop inside a shallow cavern barely visible beneath layers of snow. He ducked inside, sealing the entrance behind him with a quick activation of his suit's emergency barrier. The scavengers reached the opening seconds later. They struck the barrier repeatedly, their limbs slamming against the hardened energy field. The cavern shook with the impact, but the barrier held. After several minutes, the sounds faded. Elias remained still, listening, until the scanner confirmed the creatures were retreating. Only then did he lower the child to the ground again. She collapsed onto her knees, shaking, her tears coming freely now. "I'm sorry," she repeated. "Everyone leaves because of me." Elias knelt in front of her. He removed his helmet. The cavern air was cold but breathable. Frost clung to his hair and beard as he met her gaze directly for the first time without the barrier of glass and metal between them. "Look at me," he said gently. She hesitated, then lifted her eyes. "You didn't make me stay," he said. "I chose to." Her brow furrowed slightly, confusion cutting through the fear. Why? The question was simple. The answer was not. Elias took a slow breath. "Because leaving you would be wrong," he said. "And humans, we don't always follow the rules when the rules are wrong." She stared at him for a long moment. Then she nodded, as if committing the words to memory. The cave warmed gradually as Elias activated a compact heat unit from his pack. The child sat wrapped in the blanket, sipping from a nutrient pouch he had modified for her biology using the suit's med scanner. Her hands stopped shaking. After a while, she spoke again. "My name is Saley," she said quietly. Elias smiled faintly. "I'm Elias." She tested the name, repeating it softly as if to see how it felt. "Elias." "Yes." She looked around the cave, then back at him. "Where will we go?" Elias checked his scanner again, pulling up a star map. A single structure drifted in high orbit, a neutral trade station, old and overcrowded but functional. "Somewhere warm," he said. "Somewhere with food." Her eyes widened slightly. "Other people?" "Yes," she considered that. "Will they leave me too?" Elias did not answer immediately. He looked at her, small and fragile in the glow of the heat unit, and felt the weight of the galaxy pressing down on a single moment. "No," he said finally. "Not if I can help it." She leaned against his side, trusting, immediate, absolute. Outside the cave, the frozen world remained silent and cruel. Inside, something fragile and dangerous had begun to exist. Hope. And the galaxy was not ready for it. Chapter 3. The station that fears us. The station was called Vyerk's Drift, though few spoke its name aloud. Names carried history, and history carried blame. From a distance, the structure looked like a wound stitched together with scrap metal and desperation. Rings of mismatched hull plating rotated slowly around a central spine, patched and repatched over centuries. Dim navigation lights blinked unevenly along its surface, some flickering, some dead entirely. It was neutral territory, which meant no one truly cared what happened inside it. Elias guided the shuttle in manually, his hand steady on the controls as the docking bay doors creaked open. The bay atmosphere shimmered as pressure equalized, revealing a cavernous space crowded with ships of every imaginable design, sleek traders, battered freighters, vessels held together by little more than faith and weld lines. Saley pressed her face against the shuttle's viewport. "So many," she whispered. Elias nodded. "More than you've probably ever seen." She hesitated. "Will they be angry?" The question was careful, practiced. Elias felt something tighten in his chest. "Some of them," he answered honestly. "But they don't matter." She nodded again, though her grip on the blanket tightened. The shuttle touched down with a muted thud. Elias powered down the engines and stood, moving to open the hatch. Before he could, Saley reached out and caught his sleeve. "Don't let go," she said quietly. He met her eyes. "I won't." The hatch opened. Noise flooded in immediately, voices overlapping in dozens of languages, the clang of metal on metal, the hiss of steam vents and the hum of failing generators. The air was thick with unfamiliar scents, fuel residue, alien spices, unfiltered bodies packed too tightly together. Elias stepped out first, Saley held securely against his side. The effect was immediate, conversations faltered, voices dropped, heads turned, eyes locked onto him. Fear moved through the docking bay like a ripple through still water. "Human," someone hissed. Saley felt it before she understood it. She shrank closer to Elias, her body stiffening as the stares lingered too long, too sharp. "Why are they looking at you like that?" she asked softly. Elias kept walking. "Because they're afraid," he said. "Of me?" she asked. He did not answer right away. "Of humans," he said instead. They moved deeper into the station, past cargo cranes and automated loaders into the main concourse. The space opened up into a wide corridor lined with stalls and temporary housing units. Vendors hawked goods in sharp, rapid tones. Children of various species darted between legs, clutching food or small trinkets. But as Elias passed, the energy shifted. Stalls fell silent. Merchants pulled goods closer to themselves. Several parents reached out instinctively, drawing their children back. Saley noticed. Her steps slowed. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked. Elias stopped. He turned and knelt in front of her, ignoring the way nearby aliens stiffened at the sight of a human lowering himself. "No," he said firmly. "You didn't." "But they don't like you," she said, her voice small. Elias met her gaze. "That doesn't mean they're right." They stood again and continued forward. Whispers followed them. "Why is he here? Humans aren't supposed to come inside. Did you see what he's carrying? That's an orphan." The word landed like a blade. Saley flinched. Her fingers slipped from Elias' sleeve. He noticed immediately. They reached a security checkpoint manned by station officers, tall, armored figures with segmented plating and glowing visors. One of them raised a hand as Elias approached. "Identify yourself," the officer demanded. "Elias Cade," Elias replied calmly. "Human Exploration Corps." The officer's visor flickered as the scan ran. "State your purpose." "Seeking temporary shelter," Elias said, "and medical aid for the child." The officer's head tilted slightly. "The child is not human." "No," Elias said. "She's not. She is unregistered," the officer continued. "Unassigned dependents are not permitted to remain with off-world entities." Saley's shoulders slumped. "I can go," she said suddenly. Elias turned sharply. "What? I make trouble," she whispered. "They don't want me. I can leave." "No," Elias said, his voice harder now. "You're not going anywhere." The officer stepped forward. "Human, lower your voice." Elias straightened, his gaze level. "She is under my protection." A low chuckle came from somewhere in the crowd. "Humans protect nothing," an alien voice called out. "They burn and move on." Laughter followed, not loud, not cruel, worse, cert. Saley took a step back. Elias felt it like a physical blow. The officer raised a hand for silence. "You may remain in the station temporarily," he said, "but the child will be processed." "No," Elias said. The word echoed. The officer stiffened. "That was not a request." Elias leaned down slightly, his voice dropping but carrying clearly. "She is not cargo. She is not a problem to be solved. She is a child." The officer's visor dimmed momentarily. "Children without families are not our responsibility," he said. Something inside Saley broke. She stepped away from Elias, her eyes fixed on the floor. "They're right," she whispered. "You'll be safer if I'm gone." Elias reached for her, but she pulled back. "I don't want you to get hurt," she said. The officer gestured, and two additional guards moved closer. Elias did not raise his weapon. He raised his hands. "Give us a room," he said. "One cycle, that's all I'm asking." The officer hesitated, then nodded once. "Storage sector, level 4, temporary." It was barely shelter, but it was something. The room was small and cold, metal walls bare and scratched. A single overhead light flickered weakly. Elias activated a portable heater and set Saley down gently. She sat on the floor, pulling her knees to her chest. Elias turned his back to her briefly, checking supplies, scanning station feeds for threats. His mind raced with contingencies, exit strategies, worst-case scenarios. When he turned back, she was gone. The space where she had been sitting was empty. His heart dropped. "Saley," he called. No answer. He ran. The station corridors blurred as he pushed through the crowds, ignoring shouted protests and startled curses. His scanner swept wildly, finally locking onto a small, familiar biosignature moving toward the outer airlock corridor. He reached it just as two station authorities grabbed her. She screamed, "Elias!" The sound cut through everything. He stepped directly into their path. "Let her go," he said. The officers laughed. "Humans don't keep promises," one said. "You'll leave like you always do." Elias did not move. "You are wrong," he said quietly, "and I will prove it." The station watched. And for the first time in a very long time, the galaxy held its breath. Chapter 4. Humans do not leave the corridor outside the airlock was narrow and poorly lit, its walls scarred by centuries of hurried repairs and half-forgotten emergencies. Red warning strips pulsed faintly along the floor, reflecting off the polished armor of the station authorities holding Saley between them. Her feet barely touched the ground. Struggled weakly, her small hands clawing at empty air, her voice breaking as she cried his name again. "Elias!" The sound cut through the crowd like a blade. Elias stepped forward and stopped, not because he was afraid, because he was deciding how far he was willing to go. The guards tightened their grip when they saw the look on his face, not rage, not panic, but something far more dangerous. Resolve. "Release the child," Elias said. One of the officers tilted his head, amused. "You had your chance, human. You always do, then you leave." "I am still here," Elias replied. The officer laughed, for now. The crowd that had gathered filled the corridor wall to wall, traders, refugees, station workers, families clutching children. Their faces reflected a familiar mixture of fear, curiosity, and certainty. Certainty that this would end the way it always did. Saley's eyes met Elias's. "I tried," she whispered. "I didn't want them to hurt you." "You didn't do anything wrong," Elias said, never breaking eye contact. The officer scoffed. "Enough, take the child." The guards shifted. Elias moved, not forward, down. He knelt on the cold metal floor. The motion sent a ripple through the crowd. Humans did not kneel, not here, not ever. It was a gesture associated with surrender, submission, or ritual. Elias reached to his chest and released the locking seals on his suit. A soft hiss filled the corridor as he pulled the power pack free and set it gently on the floor between himself and the guards. Gasps echoed. Without the power pack, his suit would fail. Temperature regulation, atmospheric protection, life support, all of it would degrade rapidly in a station environment not calibrated for humans. "You are endangering yourself," one officer said sharply. "Yes," Elias replied. Saley's eyes widened in horror. "No," she cried. "Don't." Elias looked up at her and smiled, small, tired, but real. "This is what staying looks like," he said softly. The guards hesitated now, uncertainty creeping into their posture. "You will die," one of them said. "Maybe," Elias replied, "but you will not take her." The corridor fell silent. The certainty cracked. A figure pushed through the crowd, taller than the others, his movements slow but authoritative. His skin was lined with age, marked by ceremonial symbols that identified him instantly. A council elder. "What is the meaning of this disruption?" the elder demanded. The officers straightened immediately, releasing Saley just enough for her to collapse to the floor. She scrambled toward Elias without hesitation, wrapping her arms around his neck, sobbing openly now. "He stayed," she cried. "He stayed." The elder's gaze lingered on the human kneeling on the floor, then on the discarded power pack. "Explain," the elder said. The lead officer spoke quickly. "A human interfered with station law. He brought an unassigned orphan and refuses to relinquish custody." The elder turned his attention to Saley. "Your colony was destroyed," he said. "Your people are gone." She nodded silently. "You have no legal guardian." She shook her head. The elder looked back to Elias. "You claim responsibility for her." "Yes," Elias said. "You are human. Yes, you are not of her species. No, you have no standing here." Elias met his gaze steadily. "Then make one." Murmurs spread through the crowd. The elder studied Elias for a long moment. "Why?" he asked. "Why would a human risk death for a child the galaxy has already abandoned?" Elias did not hesitate. "Because leaving her would be easier," he said, "and humans don't choose easy when it costs someone else everything." The elder's eyes narrowed slightly. "Bold words," he said. "Do you have proof that humans are what you claim?" Elias reached into a secondary compartment on his suit and activated a small holographic projector. Light blossomed in the air between them. Images filled the corridor. Human medics shielding alien civilians during border wars. Human evacuation ships overloaded beyond safe capacity, refusing to leave survivors behind. Human soldiers forming living barricades so non-combatants could escape. Human graves on worlds that were not their own. "These records were classified," someone whispered. "They were erased," Elias said, "because they didn't fit the story you tell about us." The elder watched in silence as the images played. Then alarms screamed. Red lights flooded the corridor, flashing violently. An automated voice echoed through the station. "Warning, unidentified hostile vessels entering local space. Shield failure imminent." Panic exploded. The crowd surged. Parents screamed for children. Merchants abandoned stalls. Security units rushed toward defense stations. The elder turned sharply to the officers. "Status." "Multiple ships," one officer replied. "Heavy armament." Not responding to hails. The station shook violently as the first impacts hit the shields. Saley clung to Elias, shaking. "They're back," she whispered. "They always come back." Elias reached for his power pack. The elder watched him. "Can your kind help us?" the elder asked, voice tight. Elias looked down at Saley, then back up. "Yes," he said, "but she stays with me." The elder hesitated. The station shuddered again, harder this time. A distant explosion reverberated through the hull. "Agreed," the elder said. "Go." Elias snapped the power pack back into place and stood, lifting Saley into his arms. For the first time, no one tried to stop him. As he moved toward the defense deck, alarms screaming and the station tearing itself apart around them, the child pressed her forehead against his chest. "You didn't leave," she whispered. "No," Elias replied. "Humans don't." And as the first enemy ships broke through the station's outer perimeter, the galaxy was about to learn the difference between a species that conquered and one that stayed. Chapter 5. When the enemy comes, the defense deck of Vierk's Drift had not been designed for war. It had been designed for deterrence. A few outdated rail cannons, point defense turrets salvaged from decommissioned fleets, shield generators that had exceeded their intended lifespan by centuries. Enough to discourage pirates. Enough to convince opportunists to look elsewhere. Not enough to survive what was coming. Elias entered the command chamber at a controlled jog, Saley held securely against his side. The room was chaos. Officers shouted over one another in half a dozen languages. Tactical displays flickered and stuttered as systems struggled to synchronize. The station's artificial gravity fluctuated, sending loose equipment skidding across the floor. The main viewport dominated the far wall. Beyond it, space burned. Enemy ships slid into view like knives through black water, sleek angular hulls bristling with weapon arrays. Their formation was precise, disciplined, predatory. No wasted movement, no hesitation. They had come prepared. A senior tactical officer turned as Elias entered, his eyes widening briefly before hardening. "Human," he said. "You are not authorized." "I know," Elias interrupted. "Move." There was something in his voice that cut through the noise. Not command, certainty. The officer hesitated for half a second, then stepped aside. Elias moved to the central console, placing Sally gently behind a reinforced bulkhead. She clutched the blanket tightly, peering around the edge with wide eyes. "Stay here," he said. She shook her head. "I want to see." Elias hesitated, then nodded once. "All right," he said, "but don't look away." He activated the console. The system resisted him at first, security protocols flaring red across the interface. Elias bypassed them with practiced efficiency, his fingers moving quickly, precisely. Human systems spoke a different language than most galactic tech, older, more aggressive, built with the assumption that failure was inevitable and redundancy was survival. The station's systems began to respond. "Shields at 40% and falling," an officer shouted. "Enemy vessels charging primary weapons," another added. A third voice, tight with fear. "They're targeting habitation rings." Sally gasped. "They're aiming at the homes," she said. Elias' jaw tightened. "Redirect power," he ordered. "Evacuation corridors and civilian shelters first." The tactical officer stared at him. "That will weaken the command sector." "Yes," Elias said, "that's the point." The officer shook his head. "You'll leave us exposed." Elias met his gaze. "We protect people first. That's how humans fight." Before the officer could respond, the first barrage hit. The viewport flared white as enemy fire slammed into the shields. The station lurched violently, gravity flickering as systems strained to compensate. Screams echoed through the deck as several officers were thrown from their feet. "Shields down to 27%. Elias gripped the console, riding out the impact. He keyed in a new command sequence, linking the station's outdated weapons to a human tactical overlay he had uploaded moments earlier. Lines of data snapped into alignment. Targets highlighted themselves, not the enemy ships, the incoming fire. "Launch countermeasures," Elias said. "Human pattern." "What does that mean?" someone demanded. They found out. From concealed ports along the station's hull, small drones burst into space, dozens, then hundreds. They were unarmed, their frames light and angular, engines flaring bright as they accelerated directly into the path of the enemy barrage. They did not dodge. They intercepted. Explosions bloomed across space as the drones collided with incoming fire, detonating harmlessly as they absorbed the energy meant for the station. The shield strain eased slightly. The command deck fell silent. Sally stared at the viewport, her mouth slightly open. They're blocking it," she whispered. "Yes," Elias said. "They're disposable." The enemy ships hesitated. Their formation wavered as their targeting systems struggled to adapt. The unexpected tactic forced recalculations, delays. "Enemy fire pattern disrupted," an officer said in disbelief. The enemy commander appeared on the main display, a towering figure encased in dark armor, its voice distorted but clear. "You waste resources protecting civilians," it said. "Surrender the station and we will spare you further losses." Elias looked directly at the screen. "No," he said. The enemy tilted its head. "You will die for this." "Yes," Elias replied calmly. "But not today." He triggered the next phase. From the void beyond the station, new signals flared to life. Human ships dropped out of hyperspace. They did not announce themselves. They did not form up in ceremonial lines or broadcast threats. They moved, fast. They positioned themselves between the enemy fleet and the station, their hulls absorbing fire as their own weapons remained silent. Sally's breath caught. "They're getting hit," she said. "Yes," Elias replied. "That's intentional." The enemy commander's voice sharpened. "You are sacrificing your own vessels." Elias leaned closer to the display. "We always do," he said. "That's why you're afraid of us." The enemy fleet adjusted, redirecting fire toward the human ships now acting as shields. Explosions rippled across their hulls, but they held formation, engines flaring as they compensated. Inside the station, evacuation alarms softened as civilian sectors stabilized. Children cried, families held one another, and they lived. A sudden impact rocked the command deck. An enemy strike slipped through, slamming into the station's superstructure. Consoles exploded. Officers were thrown to the floor. Smoke filled the air. Elias was knocked back hard, his head striking a bulkhead. Sally screamed. "Elias," he groaned, forcing himself upright despite the pain screaming through his skull. Blood trickled down his temple, warm against the cold air. "I'm okay," he said, though his vision swam. The tactical officer stared at him, shaken. "Why?" he demanded. "Why do this for us?" Elias wiped the blood away with the back of his hand. "Because someone once did it for us," he said, "and the galaxy forgot." The enemy fleet began to falter. Human ships pressed the advantage now, not with reckless aggression but with precise, overwhelming force. Enemy vessels were disabled, not destroyed, their weapons silenced, their engines crippled. Within minutes, the battle was over. The remaining enemy ships retreated, broken and scattered. Silence fell. The viewport showed only drifting debris and the steady glow of human ships holding position. Inside the command deck, no one spoke. Saley stepped forward slowly, her eyes shining. "They stayed," she said, "all of them." Elias nodded, exhaustion settling into his bones. "Yes," he said, "they always do." And across the station, across the galaxy, something fundamental had shifted, because the enemy had come expecting fear, and found something far more dangerous: humans who refused to leave. Chapter 6. The way humans fight the silence after battle was never quiet. It was filled with echoes, systems powering down, hull plates cooling, the distant thrum of engines holding position in the dark. It was filled with the sound of people realizing they were still alive. On Vyrek's drift, that realization spread slowly. The emergency lights dimmed from red to amber. Gravity stabilized. The alarms that had screamed warnings moments ago softened into status chimes and then fell silent altogether. Inside the command deck, no one moved. They stared at the viewport. Human ships remained in formation between the station and the void, their hulls scarred and glowing faintly where enemy fire had struck. Several drifted slightly off alignment, damage control lights blinking across their surfaces as repair crews worked without rest. None of them withdrew. None of them repositioned to safer distance. They stayed. Saley stood near the viewport, the blanket trailing loosely from her shoulders, now forgotten. Her hands were pressed flat against the reinforced glass as if she could feel the ships through it. "They're hurt," she said quietly. "Yes," Elias replied. "Why don't they move away?" Elias didn't answer immediately. He was leaning against a console now, one hand braced against it to steady himself. The adrenaline that had carried him through the battle was fading, leaving pain and exhaustion behind. His head throbbed where it had struck the bulkhead. His suit registered internal bruising and mild concussion. Nothing life-threatening, he'd taken worse. "They don't move," he said finally, "because someone might still need them." Behind him, the station officers had regained their voices. "We should pursue," one said. "They're retreating." "No," Elias said. The officer bristled. "They attacked us." "And they failed," Elias replied. "Chasing them risks more lives. They could regroup." "Then we'll be ready," Elias said calmly. "Right now, we stabilize." The officer opened his mouth to argue. The elder council member stepped forward. "Stand down," the elder said. The officer froze. The elder looked at Elias, not with suspicion now, but with something new, something unsettled. "You redirected power away from command systems," the elder said. "You risked losing control." "Yes." "You placed human ships directly between enemy fire and civilian sectors." "Yes." "You sacrificed tactical advantage." "Yes." The elder's eyes narrowed. "Why?" Elias met his gaze. "Because we measure success differently," he said. The elder gestured toward the viewport. "Explain." Elias took a breath. "When humans fight," he said, "we don't start by asking how to win, we ask who needs to live." The room went still. Saley turned to look at him. "When my species first went to war," Elias continued, "we fought like everyone else. We sought victory, territory, elimination of threats." His jaw tightened slightly. "It nearly destroyed us." The elder listened without interrupting. "So we changed," Elias said. "Not because we became weaker, because we realized something." He gestured toward the viewport again. "You can't build a future on piles of bodies and call it peace." One of the younger officers scoffed quietly. "Idealism." Elias turned toward him. "No," he said, "survival." The officer fell silent. A sharp cry echoed through the command deck. Saley had spotted something. One of the human ships lurched suddenly, its lights flaring as internal systems failed. It drifted slightly out of formation, smoke venting from a ruptured section of hull. "They're breaking," she said, fear flooding her voice. Elias straightened instantly. "Damage report," he snapped. The console responded automatically, pulling in feeds from the human fleet. "Human vessel Argent Dawn reports critical hull breach," an automated voice intoned. "Life support compromised in forward sections." Sally's hands clenched. "They're going to die," she whispered. Elias' fingers flew across the console. "No," he said. He rerouted station tractor beams, overloading them far beyond safe operating parameters. Warning lights flared, systems protesting loudly. "Human," an officer shouted. "You'll tear the mounts apart." "Yes," Elias said again. "That's acceptable." The beams locked onto Argent Dawn, stabilizing the ship's drift and pulling it gently back into formation, closer to the station. Inside the human vessel, emergency bulkheads sealed, isolating the breach. Escape pods launched, but not away from the station, toward it. Sally gasped as she saw them. "They're coming here." "Yes," Elias said. "They trust us." The elder turned sharply. "Our docks aren't prepared for." "Then prepare them," Elias said. "Now." The station shook as the first escape pod clamped onto an auxiliary docking ring. Medics rushed forward instinctively without orders. They didn't stop to ask if the injured were human. They simply ran. Sally watched it all, her eyes wide and unblinking. "They're helping them," she said. "Yes." "But they were afraid before." "Yes." She looked up at Elias. "Why aren't they afraid now?" Elias knelt beside her, lowering himself carefully. "Because fear breaks when it sees courage," he said. Across the station, the shift was visible. Aliens who had hidden during the attack emerged cautiously, then more boldly. Repair crews worked side by side with human engineers who had crossed over from their ships. Med bays overflowed, not with triage of winners and losers, but with wounded of every species. No one asked who they had fought for, only whether they would live. In the command deck, the elder watched the feeds in silence. "You could have left," he said finally. "After the battle, no one would have stopped you." "Yes," Elias agreed, "but you stayed." "Yes," the elder exhaled slowly. "Our histories say humans are reckless," he said. "Violent, uncontrollable." Elias met his gaze. "They say that because we don't fight the way you expect," he said. "We don't fight for dominance." The elder tilted his head slightly. "Then what do you fight for?" Elias looked at Sally. He looked at the medics carrying a wounded human out of an escape pod, an alien child holding the medic's free hand as they passed. He looked at the station, still damaged, still fragile, but alive. "We fight so someone else doesn't have to," Elias said. Sally felt something settle deep in her chest. A truth. The station had survived, not because it was strong, but because someone stronger had chosen to carry it. And that was the way humans fought. Chapter 7. A child makes a choice the station did not celebrate. There were no cheers, no victory signals, no grand declarations broadcast across its battered halls. Vyerk's drift was too old, too scarred, too familiar with survival to mistake endurance for triumph. Instead, there was work. Med bays overflowed. Engineers crawled through half-lit maintenance shafts. Power conduits were rerouted, sealed, rerouted again. The station breathed unevenly, imperfectly, but it breathed, and everywhere humans stayed. They did not withdraw to their ships once the danger passed. They did not demand territory or compensation or authority. They crossed docking bridges with tool kits and med packs, their movements purposeful and quiet. They repaired. They lifted. They carried. Sally watched from a bench outside one of the medical bays, her feet swinging just above the floor. The blanket had finally slipped from her shoulders, forgotten entirely. In its place, Elias' jacket hung around her, sleeves far too long, the fabric still warm. Inside the bay, a human lay unconscious, his chest wrapped in a lattice of biosealant. An alien medic adjusted the monitors, hands shaking slightly as she worked. Sally leaned closer to Elias. "Is he going to wake up?" she asked. "Yes," Elias said. "Not today, but he will." She nodded, satisfied. They had been sitting there for a long time. Elias had insisted on it, on being visible, present, unmoving, not guarding, not looming, staying. The elder council member approached slowly, his staff tapping softly against the floor. He had removed his ceremonial armor, replaced it with a simple robe marked only by the insignia of his office. "You should rest," the elder said to Elias. "Your injuries." "I'm fine." Elias replied. The elder looked at him for a long moment. You are not, he said, but you are still here. Yes. The elder turned his gaze to Saley. Young one, he said gently, may I speak with you? Saley glanced up at Elias. He nodded. She stood, stepping forward with hesitant but deliberate steps. The elder lowered himself with some difficulty, bringing his eyes level with hers. You were classified as unassigned, he said. A survivor of a lost colony. Saley nodded. By our laws, the elder continued, that means the station would assume responsibility for you. You would be placed in a care collective. Saley's shoulders tensed. And by our laws, the elder said, you may also choose. Her eyes widened. Choose, she echoed. Yes, the elder said, if you wish. She looked back at Elias. The station around them seemed to hold its breath. Choose what? She asked. The elder followed her gaze. Who you belong with, he said. The words felt too big. Saley swallowed. I don't want to be a problem, she said quietly. The elder's expression softened. You are not, he said. You never were. She looked down at her hands. They always left, she whispered. Everyone always leaves. Elias stood. He moved closer, slowly, carefully, and knelt beside her again. I'm here, he said. Saley turned toward him, her eyes shining. You said humans don't leave, she said. Yes. Even when it's hard, yes. Even when everyone tells you to. Yes. Even if it costs you something. Elias did not hesitate. Yes, she took a breath. Then she did something that made the entire corridor go silent. She stepped away from the elder. She stepped past the watching officers, past the medics, past the crowd that had gathered without realizing it. She walked to Elias and she took his hand. I choose him, she said clearly. The words echoed, not loud, not dramatic, irrevocable. The elder closed his eyes. When he opened them again, something ancient had shifted. So recorded, he said. He raised his staff and struck it once against the floor. By authority of this council, he announced, his voice carrying across the hall, this child is recognized under human guardianship. A murmur rippled outward, spreading through the station like a tide. Some looked shocked. Some looked uncertain, but no one objected. Saley looked up at Elias, disbelief and hope tangled together in her expression. Does that mean? She asked. Yes, Elias said, his voice thick. It means you belong. Her breath hitched. Then she smiled. It was small at first, careful, as if she were afraid it might break if she trusted it too much. Then it grew. Later, they stood together at the viewing window overlooking the docking ring. Human ships still held position, scarred and silent. Repair lights flickered along their hulls. Docking bridges connected station to fleet in a web of shared effort. Saley pressed her forehead against the glass. They didn't leave, she said again. No, Elias agreed. The elder joined them. News of today will spread, he said. It already is. Elias nodded. It always does. And when it does, the elder continued, many will be angry, many will deny what they saw. Yes, they will say this was an exception, the elder said, that humans acted this way only once. Elias smiled faintly. Then we'll do it again, he said. Saley looked between them. Will the galaxy still be afraid of you? She asked. The elder considered the question carefully. Yes, he said at last, but not for the same reasons. She leaned against Elias' side. I think that's okay, she said. Elias rested his hand on her shoulder. Outside the station, human ships adjusted formation slightly, not retreating, not advancing, holding. And for the first time in a long time, the galaxy did not see humans as destroyers at the edge of history. It saw them as something far more dangerous. Family. Chapter 8. What the galaxy remembers. The galaxy did not change all at once. It never did. Change began the way it always had, quietly in places no one thought to look, carried by voices that had learned how to survive being ignored. The first reports left Vierk's drift within hours of the battle. Station logs, emergency transmissions, medical records, fragmented sensor data hastily compiled and sent along old trade routes. At first they were dismissed as exaggeration, fear-distorted accounts from a station that had barely survived an attack. Then the human ships filed their reports. Clean, methodical, verified, no conquest claims, no territorial demands, no victory declaration, just numbers, lives evacuated, civilians shielded, ships lost, ships damaged, ships that stayed. Analysts across the core worlds frowned at their screens. That was not how wars were supposed to be documented. The footage followed. The weapon strikes, not the explosions, the moments between. Human engineers pulling alien children from collapsed corridors, medics refusing to triage by species. Human ships positioning themselves deliberately in front of civilian rings, hulls flaring as they absorbed fire that would have killed thousands. And at the center of many of those recordings, a single human, bloodied, exhausted, kneeling on a station floor, staying. On Vyerk's drift, life settled into a new rhythm. Repairs continued. Trade resumed cautiously. The scars of the attack remained visible, but they were no longer hidden. No one tried to pretend the station was whole again. They had learned the cost of pretending. Saley walked the corridors freely now. At first people noticed, then they watched, then they smiled, not all of them. Some still looked away. Some still whispered, but none reached for her in fear. She wore a small data tag now, clipped carefully to Elia's jacket whenever she went anywhere alone. It marked her status clearly and unmistakably, under human guardianship. The words carried weight. Elias noticed the change in subtler ways. Security officers no longer tensed when he passed. Station workers greeted him with nods instead of silence. Children, alien children, watched him openly now, curiosity replacing fear. Once a small group followed him through the market, whispering among themselves. "Is it true?" one finally asked. Elias stopped. "What?" "Humans stand in front of fire," the child said. "On purpose." Elias knelt, bringing himself level. "Yes," he said, "when someone's behind us." The child thought about that, then nodded solemnly. "I think that's brave," they said. Elias smiled. Saley watched everything. She noticed the way Elias never walked ahead of her, always beside, always matching her pace. She noticed how humans aboard their docked ships greeted her by name, how they crouched instinctively when they spoke to her, how they listened. She noticed the way alien adults began to do the same. One cycle she asked Elias a question she had been holding for a long time. "Why did they lie about you?" she asked. They were standing at the viewport again, stars drifting past as the station rotated slowly. Human ships were preparing to depart now, one by one, their repairs complete. "Who?" Elias asked. "The galaxy," she said. "Why did they say humans were monsters?" Elias was quiet for a long moment. "Because monsters are easier than mirrors," he said. She frowned slightly. "I don't understand." "When someone sees you doing something they should have done," Elias explained gently, "it's easier to call you dangerous than to ask why they didn't." She considered that. "Is that why they're afraid of you?" "Yes." She leaned against him. "I'm not," she said. Elias rested his hand on her shoulder. "I know." The elder council member joined them, his steps slow but steady. "The council has reached a decision," he said. Elias turned. "About what?" "About classification," the elder replied. "Human interaction protocols." Elias raised an eyebrow. That was fast. The elder's mouth curved faintly. "The galaxy has a way of accelerating when it is embarrassed." Saley tilted her head. "Is that good?" "It is necessary," the elder said. He held out a data slate. "Humanity will no longer be listed as a restricted influence species," he said. "Not universally." Elias studied him carefully. "And the sectors that disagree?" "They will," the elder said calmly. "But they will be forced to explain why." Saley smiled. The elder looked at her. "You changed things," he said. She shook her head quickly. "He did." The elder followed her gaze to Elias. "No," he said. "He stayed. That is different." The human fleet began to depart at last. No ceremony, no broadcast. They left the way they had arrived, quietly, deliberately, with purpose. One ship remained, Elias S. Saley watched as the docking bridge retracted, the station lights reflecting softly off the hull. "Are we leaving too?" she asked. "Yes," Elias said. Her grip tightened on his sleeve. "Where will we go?" Elias looked out at the stars. "Home," he said. She smiled, resting her head against his arm. For the first time the word meant something. As the ship pulled away from Vyerk's drift, Saley watched the station grow smaller through the viewport. It glowed faintly against the darkness, a fragile point of light held together by shared effort. "Will they remember us?" she asked. Elias thought of the reports spreading across the galaxy, the arguments already igniting in council chambers, the histories being quietly reopened. "Yes," he said, "they will." "And what will they say?" she asked. He smiled faintly. They'll say humans are dangerous, he said. Saley frowned. But that's not true. Elias shook his head. It is, he said. Just not in the way they think, she waited. Humans are dangerous, Elias continued, because we don't walk past the crying child. The ship slipped into hyperspace. Across the galaxy, stories began to change, not all at once, but enough. And somewhere in the vast dark between stars, a small alien girl slept peacefully for the first time in her life, safe in the knowledge that someone would still be there when she woke. Because humanity was never feared for the worlds it burned. It was feared for the ones it refused to abandon.